three. Number three. I'm talking about Rich Bisaccia here. So this is the era of we could see another special teams coordinator as a head coach. This is not just a Harbaugh thing now, because they've put in something with the new kickoff return rules that is going to. I've been watching this because I'm going to do some work with the Frankfurt Galaxy over in the European League of Football, and they have already instituted this or something very, very similar, just as the XFL did or the UFL, whatever it is now. This new kickoff idea, and I have to tell you, as you watch rep after rep after rep, it's not as clear cut as to what is going to be successful. And so the ability of Rich Bisaccia to scheme up something, because he's got the best return guy in the business, Keyshawn Nixon. And quite frankly, you bring in Lloyd from USC and you start going, because you can have two guys back now. You start looking at him and you go, okay, there's a guy who's 6'1" or whatever, 6 foot, 220, runs a 4.4 or 4.3 lightning and can get going fast. And what you start seeing in this kickoff return game is they're 5 yards apart. As soon as the ball hits the ground or it's touched by the receiving team, both groups can go. And you think there's going to be this there's a couple of variations of where you can put two extra guys off that initial confrontation line 5 yards off. So there's going to be some doubles. There's going to be some different things you can do. But ultimately, it looks like a big scrum, like a big messy scrum. And every once in a while, a guy pops through and makes a tackle in front of the 30-yard line. Every once in a while, a guy pops through and has a big play. But for the most part, what I've seen is there's just a ton of just kind of messy scrum. Guys, the running backs don't really have a clear lane. They're not on different levels like you thought they might be. And so the ability to create doubles, to create gaps, to create, those motion slip looks that we see like from the San Francisco 49ers, for example, the ability to do that and create these little lanes where your really good players can get up to speed fast. It really is it's going to do two things. It's going to highlight the importance and the value of a good kicker, because those kickers are going to be able to place the ball wherever, the ability to place a ball where you want it on time is going to be supremely valuable. And then the ability of a special teams coordinator to design and implement a platform of plays or schemes that can adapt to the new system and benefit from the new system is going to be absolutely, I think is going to be huge. And I just think, Rich is one of those guys who comes off as, someone who's going to be incredibly enthusiastic about the ability to innovate. One question I kind of keep asking myself is, does the size of the people doing the job matter? So in other words, we used to have a ton of backup linebackers and running backs on the team because all of those guys would fit somewhere in special teams. Do you want bigger players when the space is smaller? Do I want to put in tight ends, defensive line, offensive line guys, knowing that they don't really have to go too far? And, I had some coaches tell me, oh, well, a DB is going to run around them. No, they're not. And if they do, they'll run far enough around them that there'll be lanes. You still have gap integrity. You have good athletes at the offensive line, defensive line, tight end, defensive end positions. So can you afford to have some bigger guys on the return? And what does that look like as far as opening up some of these small cracks to push a Keyshawn Nixon, get to get one-on-one with the kicker? All right, let's go to number 4. This is a big one. I want to put this the right way. Does the offensive line take a step forward even though Aaron Jones is no longer in the backfield? I think this is the biggest question when it comes to the offense. You have obviously lost David Bakhtiari, and I know he's played sparingly the last couple of years, but you always had this we're kind of, there's a difference between having a guy who is the dude, and then there's this dude that's kind of doing backup stuff, right? So maybe you change protections because Rasheed Walker is starting his first game, or when Yash was in there, he's got 2 games to back up Bakhtiari. So we're maybe we're calling the plays a little bit differently because it's not Bach, and where there's this reality of like we don't have an all-pro back there. But now you have across the board, you have Zach Tom, who is as competent as there is at the right tackle position. You have Jenkins who's as competent as there is at the left guard position. You probably still have Myers at center. You have a competition with Sean Ryan and maybe the first round draft pick at the right guard position. You have potentially a competition with Rasheed Walker and the first round draft pick at Jordan Morgan at the left tackle position. But once you establish that, you're probably calling plays as if like your guys are in there and there's going to be like the gloves are kind of coming off, or are they going to have to do something unique to safeguard a certain spot all year round? Some teams do have to do that. I don't think the Packers are in the business of doing that. Aaron Jones, and as everybody talks about last year, and they talk about right now because his contract's coming up, they talk about Jordan Love's contract and how well he played in the last half of this, or the last 6 games of the season, postseason. And it's absolutely true. But if you go back and just watch tape and be objective about what is happening in these games, Aaron Jones is healthy. When Aaron Jones is healthy, he was lighter fluid. He was all the hyperbole you want to use to describe the effect he has on that offense, the effect he has on that offensive line, the confidence that is gained from having somebody like that in the backfield. As you compare him to the new guy, Josh Jacobs, who's a great player. Aaron averages almost a yard more a carry. He has, he has a ton of explosive runs. He's great he's a different kind of guy. And what we've seen from this offensive line, at least, is that in many instances, they need an Aaron Jones type player to have Aaron Jones type plays. In other words, AJ Dillon, I'm not going to compare Josh Jacobs and AJ Dillon because I think Josh is a much better player, except for the fact that they do have very similar running styles. So if you are going to sit here and say, well, Josh is a great player, Aaron's a great player, they're both great players, we're going to have a similar result, it's not necessarily that easy, because you have to align what that player does well with what you are able to call. And again, this is a big Matt LaFleur thing. Now, because you have so many other good players on the field and you have a very, very good quarterback, it certainly makes that job easier. But without that guy who is getting you, let's be honest, an extra yard per carry every time he touches the ball, opposed to anybody else who carried the rock for Green Bay or the guy who just came in, Josh, you have to just ask the question, what do you do to improve? And we've talked about this before. I think for me, if I'm Adam Stenavich, I'm going to spend more time in that room. I'm going to spend more time on the practice field, at least in pre-practice, talking and working with those guys on some basic fundamentals of the sport, getting really good at the basics again, or for the first time for some of these guys, and just build confidence as much as I can with that room, because we can talk about the receiver room. We can talk about how good these tight ends are going to be, and they're going to be good. We can talk about Jordan Love and his contract, and is he a top 10 guy? Is he a top 5 guy? Is he a 15 guy? If your offensive line isn't good, you're not winning the Super Bowl. You're not winning the NFC Championship. Because you look at the road you got to go through. Detroit Lions have one of the best in the league. Philadelphia Eagles are going to be back this year, one of the best in the league. Dallas Cowboys are not going to be back this year, but they have a very good offensive line. And the San Francisco 49ers have a good center and an all-time elite left tackle that actually makes up for kind of the average play of everybody else, because he is so dominant in the run game, particularly on the backside. And of course, Juszczyk and George Kittle, which we can call them offensive linemen for all purposes here. So how do they get better? I think you spend a lot more time with Stenavich. I think you spend a lot more time becoming masters of your technique. And I think it's going to really come up or down to how Matt LaFleur uses Tucker Kraft. How if we're going to put those guys in the game, how valuable are they as blockers? Can they be more valuable than they were last year? Do we bring in a true fullback? I got a fullback that's surfing in San Diego right now, Paul Questenberry, 6-year Marine Corps officer, played defensive end at the Naval Academy. You want a guy that'll thump? Go hire him. He'll thump. But bring in a guy that has that collision in the hole and moves that linebacker backwards. Let's get a real bona fide. Let's not put DeGuara in there and say, oh yeah, we just close your eyes and pretend he's a thumper. Let's go get a Lorenzo Neal-ish player and just take a roster spot. Because I think that'll really help this offensive line. Because there is going to be this adjustment period from having an Aaron Jones who's got he's electric, change of pace, can run. He runs incredibly hard for 205 pounds, but he can break tackles and he can beat guys with his feet. Different style of player now, very, very effective player, but different style. If you really want to help these guys, you're going to have to up their ability, but you're also really going to have to improve and continue to manufacture yards through the use of your tight ends, and hopefully they bring in a fullback. The last question I have here, and I didn't even write it down because I'm such an idiot, but who emerges from the receiver room as the number one guy? Is it a wide receiver? And I'm just pulling up the depth chart real quick from last year. Leader in receiving yards is Jaden Reed, right around 800. You got Dobbs, you got Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, and then you go down. You got Bo Milton, Malik Heath, Torrey, who's I think going to play a bigger role this year. Listen, for me, who's gonna be that guy? I think we're established now that, and I don't think it's Christian Watson's fault, but because of his hamstring injuries last year, because you're always worried about them, and because, quite frankly, I don't know that throwing the deep ball, that connection is what Jordan Love does best and what this offense is designed to do the best. I think you're probably looking for those, get a guy in space, make him, allow him to, be dynamic, those short to medium range passes, a lot of the in-cut stuff. You just look at kind of what is working around the National Football League, and you think, nobody talks about Romeo Dobbs because of Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks in particular last year. Bo Melton came in at the end and did a really good job. And you just see all this talent. You see the tight end talent. I know Tucker Kraft had a great year at the end last year, had some good numbers. But you look at Luke Musgrave and his potential as a receiving tight end. For me, I just think Dontavian Wicks is a very, very unique. He's a unique build. He's a unique, talent for given his size. And then it's hard to look past a Romeo Dobbs or a Jaden Reed in particular, because he kind of fulfills that role when you start talking about, the Niners and Debo. You just kind of look at him and go, man, you can really you can hand him the ball off. You can run jet sweeps. You can put him in the backfield. You can run screens. You can run, you can run the wide receiver stuff. You can run deep route. He can do everything. And we're in this phase right now, I think, in the National Football League, where if you've got not a Tyreek Hill, but a smaller guy who's well built and can run through stuff, like, you want to utilize him. The traditional, Dobbs reminds me, I don't know why, maybe it's the number, he reminds me of Robert Brooks. And that is a compliment because he's a phenomenal player. But Robert was the number two wide receiver to Antonio Freeman. I just don't think, when you look back to parallel generations, I don't think that maybe Watson and Free are kind of the same player, obviously. But what we're looking at now with a four wide receiver set or a split out set with that 12 personnel, and having Tucker and Luke Musgrave there, you just really see the opportunity, I think, for Wicks or Jaden Reed to take the next step in this offense and become those guys. Now, having said that, it's very, very likely that when you look at the leaders in receptions and yards next year, you're going to have, let's say, Jordan Love's going to have 4,500 yards passing, and you've got four guys right around 900, 1,000 yards. I think that's a very, very likely possibility. you got like 4 guys that are right around 900 yards, whether they're separated by 50 yards or something like that. Like it doesn't make one of them a bona fide number one. I think what's interesting with this group is because you have unique skill sets and every defense has a soft spot, there's going to be nights where you're like, all right, like Watson on the crosser routes, Watson on the deep corners, Watson on the posts, in the cover 4 stuff, beating that backside safety, like all day. We're going to take 4 shots tonight and you're going to have 2 touchdowns. Dobbs running the intermediate stuff and the outs, you're running the deep digs all night, right? The way they play their safeties and their linebacker spread is just too big. There's too much of a window. Awesome. Reed, Wicks, quick crossers, get the ball in there. I mean, there's just all these guys are good at a lot of stuff. But when you kind of think about what separates them from from each other, there's going to be opportunities for every player to have a big day. And the cool thing is, I think with Matt LaFleur, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would imagine that when he puts in his offense, he's thinking like, and he might even communicate this. Hey, this is the defense they're playing. We know what we like against this kind of defense. So we're going to plan for you, and you are going to have big days. And here's why. And here's what I'm going to keep dialing up. And if they do this, here's our combat to that. Like he seems like, and I think a lot of coaches, this new generation of coaches, I think they feel like one way to get buy-in with these guys is to communicate exactly how that person is going to have individual and therefore team success versus these specific defenses. And obviously that comes a lot of times from the wide receiver coach, but I think Matt being the play caller and the head coach, I think you're going to get that extra bit of attention, so that what comes with that attention is it comes attention to detail. Here's how we want to make this work. Here's how we want to run this route. Here's the specifics that I'm looking for as the head coach and play caller, so that you know exactly what's going through my head. If you do this, we will do that. So that's a long-winded way of me saying I think Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks are going to be the guys that pop out. Having said that, if there were 4 guys sitting around 900 yards, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I wouldn't be shocked at all. So all that being said, I think we have 2 weeks till training camp. 22nd? No, we have 3 weeks till training camp. I'm out next week. We'll probably do a show the week before that. It's just tough to do shows when there's no tape. I can go back for some other tape and whatnot, but it's tough to do shows. I lose my enthusiasm, and then I'll turn on ESPN and I can't believe what I'm watching sometimes. So I want to just I love just sticking to the football. I love sticking to the football. But having said that, you guys get with me on MikeWall68 on Twitter, X, and give me some ideas. Hell, maybe we'll look at some tape in the next couple of weeks. All right. Until then, enjoy yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.